Good evening, and thanks for having us in your space, whether you be at home, at the bar, or at work. We want to thank you for your stewardship week after week. You allow us to share topical issues of concern to us as Guyanese, or even those of you who live further afield. Oftentimes in our discussion, the question about who is our neighbor often arises. And sometimes those of us who live in far-flung areas, our neighbor, as we say, might be miles apart. And those of us who live in the city, it might be just next door. Sometimes we can stretch our hands through the window and, almost touch our neighbor. That's how close we live. But, the question of neighbor or neighborliness was answered in the scripture in Luke chapter 10. Jesus told the parable of a man who was robbed and beaten and left to death. And three persons had the opportunity to tend to him. The first two did not. But the last one had compassion, care, and concern for him. And he tended to him. Quite recently, the task force made an announcement concerning an expansion of the capacity in buildings where we commute, churches, bars, and all of that. And there might have been some amount of celebration. But even though that has been increased in terms of numbers, we want to encourage us as Guyanese that we should be concerned about each other. The last man in the parable, he was a foreigner. He traveled from a great distance to go to where this man was, but he was about his own business. And he showed compassion and concern. And Jesus said, our neighbor, my neighbor, is one who shows compassion and concern. So we want to encourage all of us to show compassion and concern for the other person as we observe all the protocols concerning COVID-19. So this evening, we want you to join us, sit back and relax, and we'll talk and encourage each and every one of us to be of great compassion and concern to each other. Gentlemen.
It was Jesus who said, if two shall agree as touching anything, two shall agree on the earth as touching anything, whatever they ask shall be done, shall be granted. And so there are tremendous possibilities in agreement, and no less than the Bible recognizes those possibilities. Agreement strengthens relationships. For persons to agree, obviously, they would have had to have some kind of relationship or some common ground where they decide to go forward on a project or on some goal or objectives. Agreement also creates alliances. It creates alliances that make the agreeing parties a force to be reckoned with. And that's so important. Agreement creates alliances where the agreeing parties, they become a force to be reckoned with rather than approaching a matter, approaching an issue as a single person. Agreement also minimizes disputes. There's less argument, less contention because persons are seeing with a common eye. And so the possibilities of agreement are tremendous, and we cannot afford to look past that. So we can agree to stave off persons who might want to threaten our very existence as we come together, because there is no division there, so there is strength and power in agreement. And by the way, we are so happy that the 12 fishermen would have been released from Venezuela. And as I understand it, they should be home sometime this evening or early tomorrow morning. And so we are happy to know that God has really answered our prayers, because we continue to pray for these men and their families. And obviously, God has answered our prayers, and we will see them shortly, as we would have observed. And so we can agree to repel persons or people who might want to threaten our very existence as a people. We can agree to build a nation, to build this nation, by just examining as a team things that must be done, and so with one mind and one effort, move the nation forward. We can also agree, as we heard earlier, COVID was mentioned, we can agree also to protect ourselves from against this COVID-19. So you see, everything stems from this agreement, because there is power. If everybody say, look, we are going to defend ourselves, protect ourselves against the attack, whether the churches would have, the law would have now permitted 40% or whatever, persons should not see this as an opportunity to express some kind of laxity in how they approach the whole thing. But we could agree now, we could agree to the fact that, look, here, there is an increase, but we are agreeing that we will continue to protect ourselves even more than how we start to protect ourselves. And we could actually see an opportunity where Guyana could continue to grow and expand even in the midst of the pandemic. But the whole thing has to be, persons got to be responsible in their thinking and in their conduct. But like Jesus said, if two shall agree as touching anything, if we agree, all of these things we mentioned, we could do the impossible.
Remarkable observations. I particularly like, pardon me, the parable of the neighbor, and the neighbor was a foreigner, the one who helped the struggling victim had come from a foreign country. The story is told at a time when there was no pandemic. Could you imagine now if this foreigner had come from, well, let's say, for example, Brazil, where there's a variant of the COVID-19 that so far has posed a real threat, and countries have responded by restricting travel to persons from Brazil, like they've done with persons from South Africa because of the variant COVID-19. Could you imagine if that foreigner had come from there in his attempt to help, and he didn't observe the protocol? You know, I'm asking us to imagine. We have some real live situations in our country where we have free social intercourse, travel with our neighbor, Brazil. And I think there are several regions where on a usual normal day, normal period, their citizens and our citizens crisscross border points. And I think it could be in region 7, region 8 and 9. And at this point in time, because of the presence of this virus, what we are saying to our folk is we need to exercise due care. We need to be more responsible, and because this virus does not discriminate, and so we are pleading with our fellow countrymen at this time. Please exercise due care. Please understand that it should not be business as usual. And for those who are rejoicing, I haven't been to a bar in a long while. And I don't know what 40% increase patronage to bars will mean. But I have been to churches, and I know what that means. And this new position imposes a very special responsibility on the leaders of these institutions to ensure that we enforce, in order to protect the people, the parishioners, all those who go to the house of worship. And we need to be able to wear a face mask. We need to be able to have an opportunity to sanitize, whether it's by using a hand sanitizer or by washing our hands right there in the compound of the religious institution. And we need to be able to socially distance. And we need to be able to have our temperatures checked. We need to be able to know who attended which service in terms of name and addresses, just in the event, the unlikely event, I like to say, of the need to do contact tracing. So this is, as we go deeper and deeper into this situation before herd immunity is developed, we must not throw caution to the wind. Gentlemen, I plead with you, and I plead with all of us who are watching. We have to be very vigilant.
Persons might be saying, Bishop, that soon we'll get vaccine, and there are several companies that are developing vaccines with great potency. But I was listening to one of the expert, the medical expert, and he kept emphasizing the fact that the wearing of a mask and social distancing are far better, much better than being vaccinated. So he's making the point, so while we await the vaccine, given the fact that there are so many different strains that are developed and the virus is mutating, pretty often, we cannot overemphasize the fact that we need to observe the protocol: social distancing, wearing a mask, and sanitizing our hands as frequently as possible.
Being responsible, protecting each other, taking care of each other is not seasonal. As we would usually use the Latin term, that should be our modus operandi, period. And so we don't have that luxury of laxing systems and structures that will help us in our health and protecting and taking care of each other. We ought to be responsible. We ought to continue to practice safe hygiene, because it is not only beneficial to us, but to so many others, our neighbors, our friends, our families. So this is a clarion call for all of us to please ensure that we practice the protocols and also that we encourage others. Because even in our home and workplaces and so on, when people see us maintaining that sense of responsibility, they will be encouraged also to continue. So let us all together work. Let us come into agreement. Let us find common ground, because that is what makes us one, what unites us, our determination to work hard, our determination to watch out for each other. That is what will help us. That is what makes us unique as Guyanese. And so let us continue to work together to ensure that we protect and we watch out for each other.
It puts a greater strain upon us with the 40% with the increase that we have, a greater responsibility in looking out for each other. Because some people might think it's a free up, and so we can do what we want. But we must think about the virus has no respect for anyone. And everyone can attract this virus. with the way we operate with each other. So the responsibility of us looking out for each other, the responsibility of us observing the protocol is essential. It is not if, it is that we must observe the protocols. And that's the only way we will be able to help each other and be able to prevent the spread of this virus.
Something important for us to also note during a period like this is that we need to open our eyes to understanding not only the process and the protocols and the activities, but it's for us to make a connection between what they're asking us to do versus the impact of what they're asking us to do. So don't just put on a mask because everybody putting on a mask. I don't think that that's a smart way to go. Don't just social distance because they tell you you have to social distance. There are reasons behind why they are saying these things, and it's important that we look at this. For example, I like to bake bread, right? So when my mom initially taught me to bake bread, keep in mind I've been baking bread for about 5 years now. She told me how to do a rough knead of the bread first, leave it to rise, then do a smooth knead after half an hour, leave it to rise, and then leave it to rise for another half an hour after that parcel it off. And as I was going through the process again with my mother recently, she told me, why do you do the rough knead? As in, instead of kneading it smoothly the first time, why do you have to do the rough knead? And I said, that's what you taught me. And then she told me that, no, the reason why I do the rough knead is because my hands are tired. So really, you're supposed to do a smooth rough knead at the beginning, a smooth kneading of the bread in the beginning. So now I understand that I was following a process that was taught to me without connecting it to the original impact or the impact it was supposed to have. So understand when people are telling you to wear the mask and when they're advising you to social distance, it's not always that they're trying to tie you down and they're trying to force you to comply with these arbitrary rules. In a time like this, arbitrary rules, I don't believe they're going to be effective. People in Guyana need to understand that the reason why they're giving advice is because these are things that they've been trying and testing in other places in the world, and this is how we could kind of move forward into the next phase. So be critical of the instructions that you're getting and always reevaluate the process after you see, this has been working, this has not been working. And the next thing I would advise people to do is that as they consider taking the vaccine, well, I don't know if it's going to become mandatory, but as they consider taking the vaccine, to be critical of it, look and see what is happening, and make a decision that works for the benefit of not only you, but for the benefit of your community, and be open to advice and criticism from reliable sources.
Well, if I could just the vaccine, just to follow up on what Martin said, the vaccine does not take one out of the woods in terms of, as persons may say, in terms of contracting COVID. Once you receive that vaccination, you have to understand that the human immune system has to take some time before it develops that kind of protective protection against the virus. And so for one to believe that when you get this injection, you could continue to run around and have fun and so on, you could very well contract COVID while you have that, you would have received a dose, or so you could very well contract COVID and die. And so it is important that those protocols that we've kept talking about continue to be maintained, the sanitizing, the wearing of the mask, the social distancing, because the human body has to take some time before the immune system is able to develop in such a way that it will protect the person from contracting COVID. So I think that that's a piece of medical advice, that those persons who believe that once you get this vaccine, everything is dandy and happy and you could run around the place, continue your life as usual. One has to be very careful because you could still contract the virus and, like I said, and die.
3,500 years before we have this point in time. No less a book than the Bible, because human life is very dynamic. And this is not the first time the world or humanity is faced with these kinds of difficult situations. Moses, writing in the Pentateuch, I'd like to, long before the 21st century, because of human nature, because of the presence of diseases among other people, in Exodus chapter 30, verses 18 to 21. The advice was given to wash your hands so that they will not die. Talking about hand hygiene, the same hand sanitizing we're talking about. Nothing is new under the sun, Solomon posited. And so at that time, they needed to wash their hands. And so it is a very excellent public health advisory that is not new. It was there since 3,500 years ago. Here, Moses offered another public health advisory, this time in Leviticus chapter 13, verses 4, 5, and 46. He said, if you have symptoms, keep your distance, cover your mouth, and avoid contact. Now, this is amazing in terms of, using the two things here, using the face mask and also social distancing. Leviticus 13, if you have symptoms, keep your distance and cover your mouth and avoid contact. And this is not new. Leviticus 13, 4 and 5, who is infected must remain in quarantine for 7 to 14 days. It's amazing that this old antique book has remedies that are relevant in our 21st century world. The scientific community, some people are taking credit for it. I don't know if it's the CDC or the FDA or whoever it is saying, this is what you need to do. But Moses recorded at a time in antiquity, distancing, social distancing, hand hygiene, sanitizing, and wearing a face mask was in vogue then. It is relevant even today, along with other biblical advisories.
If those people were not disciplined, they would have died, because that was coming from a man of God. So they had to be disciplined to carry out that mandate that Moses was giving them. Amen.
In order to have agreement, there must be appreciation. We want to appreciate our leadership. We want to appreciate the frontline workers for all they have been doing. The percentage for bars and churches is now 40%. With increase comes responsibility, and responsibility is a sign of maturity. So I would like to encourage everyone to be mature, be responsible. Let us adhere to the COVID-19 protocols so that we will live. God bless you.
And even as we adhere to the COVID-19 protocols, it is also important for us not to become relaxed or not to become accustomed to our numbers, the number of deaths, the number of positive cases, and so on. Because even as we record this program today, Thursday, the World Meter coronavirus update, Guyana has 7,714 positive cases with 177 deaths. I mean, one death is serious. So we have to ensure that we continue to be responsible, follow the advisories, so that we can not only save our own lives, but save the lives of people that are around us.
So let us come into agreement. Let us come into agreement with the guidelines. Let us come into agreement. Let us accept this new responsibility that has been trusted upon us. The government has trusted us as citizens. They're saying, okay, it is time, the cases have been stabilized. It is time we increase to help the businessmen. It is time we increase to help spiritual leaders. It is time we increase to help citizens on the whole. So with this new responsibility, leaders of bars, leaders of churches, leaders of places of worship, and leaders of households, this responsibility, you've received a promotion at work. So before you were a supervisor or an ordinary staff, and now you're a supervisor or the manager. So of course you're being paid more. And with being paid more, in this case, you've been given more. And being paid more and being given more has this serious responsibility. And this responsibility as well, in our case, in this situation, comes with compassion. Dr. Lee mentioned earlier the word, who's our neighbor? It's not the person who is necessarily physically next to you. It's anyone that you come into contact with that you can help. So can you help me? Can I help you? If the answer is yes, then we're neighbors. So let's help each other in this time of pandemic and come into agreement with the guidelines that our leaders have given us. We entrusted them with leadership. Let us now follow them. Does it make sense? Yes, it does.
Dr. Lee, I want to give you the final words because you have an understanding of our geography. If you were to give advice to our countrymen who live in these regions with not just our countrymen, we want to speak to our countrymen and their leaders in their communities. What advice would you give to them? Our border towns.
I would encourage them. The task force has given broad guidelines. I would want to encourage them to follow those guidelines slavishly. There's great dependence on cross-border trade for sustenance and for the maintenance of livelihood. And so it's not that we want to stop that, but in executing your daily function, please wash your hands, social distance. And if you have developed any of the symptoms, please report it as quickly as possible to, in those far-flung areas, you have medics or you have your medic, you have your community health worker, report as soon as possible. And so you can take also your preventative action. If you have developed a fever, isolate yourself and report the matter so that in doing so, you are acting responsible and you are acting as a good neighbor if you do that. And so the clarion call is here for all of us, irrespective we live on the coast, we live in the hinterland area, is to operate in a responsible manner so that we can, really suppress and finally eliminate this virus. So please, it's a plead, please act responsible and please exercise good neighborly behavior. God bless you.
I'm Celicia on behalf of the set reminding you that your whole life is the sum of your choices. God bless you.